So anyway, so welcome to How to Eliminate Public Speaking Fear in 3 Easy Steps. This is something that we originally did as one of the episodes of my podcast, the Fearless Presentations podcast. And if any of you have actually listened to that, I think we're getting to a point now where that podcast it's getting really popular. We're getting as many as like 90,000 people a week actually listening to the podcast. So it's a very powerful way to continue to grow as a speaker and help people kind of really reduce public speaking fear and become a more exceptional speaker anyway. And but like I said, though, this was one of the episodes that we did, and it was actually a fairly short episode. It was only about 20 minutes or so, and after, I don't know, maybe about 6 or 7 months or so of the podcast being out, we went back and looked at the statistics, and almost 100% of the people who actually started listening to that particular episode finished it, and we had such a much higher rate of people accessing that podcast than any other. So we thought, hey, that would be a great topic to cover in a webcast. So what we're going to do here is I'll kind of go through the 3 steps, and like I said, I'll try to go through these fairly quickly, and hopefully this will give you some really good value to the time that you've spent with us anyway. So the very first step in how to kind of eliminate public speaking fear is you have to first identify where that nervousness is coming from. So if you have a nervousness or self-consciousness and anxiety, whatever it is, and just so you know, one of the things that we've kind of figured out over the years is that there have been an unlimited number of statistics out there about public speaking fear and how prevalent it is. And when I first started doing public speaking training, the people who taught me how to do training, they basically said that about 95% of the people have some type of public speaking fear. I've seen other people that say 90% of people have some type of nervousness. And then I've seen some folks who actually study phobias that say that the percentage is actually only about 10%. So the thing is that what I've kind of figured out is that there's about 10% of the population that have such a tremendous fear of speaking in front of a group that it's kind of a phobia, and it keeps them from doing anything really. And then there's the 10% that are really confident and really good at speaking in front of a group, and then there's the 80% in the middle, and that's where most of us fall into. Most of us fall into that 80%, and it ranges from all the way down to that extreme of where it's almost near phobia up to, hey, I'm just getting a little nervous when I'm speaking in front of my boss or something like that. So wherever you are on that spectrum, though, hopefully the content that we're going to cover here today will really help. So there are 2 different areas that can create nervousness or public speaking fear. One is when we have a past challenge. Something has happened in the past that causes us to dwell on that. So we see ourselves as, hey, I've tried that before, it didn't work so well, and so I'm much more hesitant to try that in the future. Interestingly enough, we get a number of people, and I'll get at least, I don't know, maybe 50, 100 people or so every single year that will come through the Fearless Presentations class, and they'll tell me that they've had this fear of public speaking since they were a kid. And a lot of times it will happen as a result of something really minor that happened when they were really young. And they kind of dwell on it. My wife is a great example. When she was, I think she told me once that when she was in 4th grade, she had to get up in front of the class and do an arithmetic problem on the chalkboard. And she said she had it all on paper, she had it perfect, but when she got up in front of the class, the pressure really got to her, and she couldn't remember exactly what she was supposed to be doing. And she sat down, she was all confused, she was embarrassed, and she said, that's when I realized that I'm not really good at math. And just so you know, my wife is exceptional at math. She's really good. In fact, she owns her own business and she does all the bookkeeping and stuff like that. But she doesn't think of that as math, because she thinks of math as being that thing that you do in front of the class that's embarrassing. So those little kind of things that happen early in our lives can sometimes kind of stick with us. Another one of the biggest places that I've seen over just from my anecdotal experience as a public speaking coach, that where public speaking fear comes from is book reports when you're in high school. That's one of the biggest places. The reason why, by the way, is that when especially high school students get up to give a book report, they have to stand up in front of their highly critical peers and give a presentation about a book. that they never read. And so as a result, that can be fairly challenging. It can be a difficult kind of thing to do. And so they go through that experience and they think, oh man, I'm just not good at public speaking. Well, it's not that they're not good at public speaking. It's that they're not good at giving a presentation about a book that they never read or about something that they don't feel like they're an expert on. And so as a result, there'll be more anxiety there. The biggest one, though, that I see in the business world especially is where we get up to give a presentation, and most often it's because there's some type of high stress activity around the presentation. Could be that we're presenting to a board of directors, or we're presenting to our bosses, or it could be that we're presenting to our peers. It could be that we're doing a sales presentation and there's a huge amount of money on the line, and as a result that makes us more nervous. And even if we do really, really well in that situation, if we don't think we did well, it'll still make us more nervous the next time we get up to speak. So those are the things that I kind of see most often in the business world anyway, is where we got up to give a presentation. You may have done really poorly, and if that's the case, then that's going to cause a tremendous amount of fear. But even if you did really well, if you don't think you did well, you're still going to have that nervousness or fear. And that's what we can really kind of help with. Now, the second area of the second situation that will occur that will cause us to have more nervousness and fear is when there's a perceived risk of failure, or perceived risk, an imminent fear of death or embarrassment or something like that. I'll give you some examples of some different skills that cause this, by the way. So very first time that you go skydiving, I guarantee you're going to be nervous. I don't care how confident you are. I don't care how much time you spend in ground school or whatever, that when you're standing with your feet on the edge of the plane about to jump out, you're going to be terrified. Because of the perceived risk involved in that. Another one is where it's maybe not a skill, but a situation that somebody else might put us in that will cause us to have an imminent fear is a robbery. Let's say that somebody is robbing you at gunpoint. Well, at that point, you're going to be very nervous. There's an imminent fear of death in that situation, and so that's going to cause nervousness to occur. For public speaking, the analogy I like to use, or the example I like to use from real life, is actually a little bit more accurate. It's learning to drive a car. Learning public speaking is a skill, just like when a teenager is 15, 16 years old and he or she is learning to drive a car. It's one where as you do things that are more difficult, you're going to feel more nervous. So like, for instance, if a teenager starts the very first time that he or she is behind the wheel, if they start out on the freeway, they're going to be terrified, right? That's why we don't do that. That's why we don't give kids, the young people anyway, that are learning to drive a car, we don't start them out on the most difficult thing, the freeway. But that's what happens to a lot of us in public speaking. A lot of times what's going on is that we're thrown into a situation where we're given a presentation where there's a lot on the line, and it's just like we're starting out on the freeway. And so as a result, again, that nervousness is going to kick up. So anyway, that's step number one, is to kind of figure out where that nervousness is coming from. If you know where the nervousness is coming from, it's going to be easier for you to conquer that fear or get rid of that nervousness. So step two is, once you identify where that fear is coming from, you want to minimize your risk of failure when you attempt that skill. So, and by the way, this is the same with public speaking, it's the same with driving a car, same with skydiving, any of that kind of stuff that we talked about before. But if you're on the internet, if you're kind of looking at the screen, there's a picture of a fish, a fish kind of jumping into a bigger fish bowl. And basically what we're recommending here is that if you want to minimize the risk of failure, one of the very first things that you can do is to start small and then grow. Basically, to add something more complicated. So do something small, but do it really, really well, and then add something to it and do that really well, and then add something small to it and do that really well. That is the best way in the world to kind of grow. And to go back to some of the examples that I talked about before and kind of show you how this corresponds to public speaking, like for instance, that example, the picture that I showed before was of the ballerina, being nervous on stage. Well, I mean, the way that a dance coach or a director might help that child ease that nervousness or fear is to put that child in a controlled environment and have the kid practice over and over and over again. So, like for instance, before they do a full recital, they're likely to do a dress rehearsal. The dress rehearsal is one where they still have an audience, but most likely it's going to be a smaller audience. It's going to be an audience that is a little bit easier for them to practice the skill in. There's less risk of a failure in a dress rehearsal than it is in front of all the parents and everything, right? So that's one of the things that you can do is when you're presenting is kind of put yourself, if you know you're going to be nervous, or if you're starting to feel that anxiety, then give yourself kind of a dress rehearsal. Practice with a partner or practice with a group of people, and that will help you kind of reduce that. For the example of the kid that is doing a book report, well, if that makes you nervous, obviously that's going to be a more nerve-wracking kind of thing. The easiest way for that kid to reduce that nervousness is to speak up more in class, ask questions, be a part of the discussion in that class. That's going to help build that skill of communicating in front of that group. And so it's an easy first step, and then you add something more complicated to it. Do the first step, add something more complicated. If you're in the business world, you get nervous speaking in front of a group, speak up more at staff meetings, join a committee. Join a social group, go join a Rotary Club or something like that, run for office. All of those kind of things, those are situations where it's less risky if you have a hiccup, if you have a potential roadblock or failure, because if it's happening in one of those smaller kind of situations, you can overcome it, or you can make a change, and as a result have a success very quickly doing that. So minimizing the risk, the first thing that you want to keep in mind is you want to start small and then grow. One of the things that we do in the Fearless Presentations class, by the way, the reason why the class is one of the reasons why it's so popular, is that we break presentation skills down into component parts and have each participant really master those component parts one at a time. Do something really simple, do that really, really well. So when they do that well, they go back and they go, oh my gosh, that was easy. And then we add something to it that's a little bit more complicated. And then add something to it that's a little bit more complicated. Add something to it that's a little bit more complicated. So we do that over and over and over again, so that by the time we take we go for a lunch break, or we finish for the first day, there's a tremendous amount of growth that has occurred. Now, in addition to that, one of the bigger ways that you can minimize the risk of failure, or minimize that risk that's involved when there's something imminent that's going on, is to go through training. So the example that I gave before was the skydiving. I mean, we said that it doesn't matter how much training you go through, when your feet are on the edge of that plane, you're going to be nervous. However, that nervousness will diminish at least a little if you've gone through a significant amount of training. You're going to be more terrified if you've done no training than if you've done some training, right? So that's one of the ways that the people that own the skydiving companies will help folks reduce that nervousness, is to minimize that risk by going through training. They're going to put them through a series of exercises that are going to cause them to experience something similar to what they're going to feel in the air, and then as a result, when they do feel that, it's going to be less taxing on them. We talked about getting robbed at gunpoint. I mean, that's a very stressful, challenging kind of thing. You're going to be very, very nervous in that situation. You'll be less nervous, though, if you've spent 10 or 15 years in a Krav Maga class. Right? So if you've done a significant amount of training about how to disarm an opponent, now all of a sudden, yeah, you're still going to be nervous because that fear of death is there, but way, way, way less nervous than somebody without any of that training. So the training is important. I think the biggest example, though, like we said before, was the young person, the teenager that's learning to drive a car. That the training that young person receives before they actually get on the freeway is critical to them reducing that nervousness. They're still going to be nervous when they get on the freeway for the first time, but the reduction of nervousness and allowing them to think clearly and being able to perform better will occur if they've gone through the training program. So in the training program, basically what a kid's going to go through in driver's ed is they're going to start out in the school parking lot. They're going to start out with cones, and they're going to get really good at parking the car in cones. And before they get anywhere, that is more dangerous. So they're going to get comfortable there and then add something to it. They'll start doing right-hand turns, and then they'll start doing left-hand turns. So basically, every single one of those things that the driver's ed coach is doing is minimizing the risk of training or of failure, minimizing the risk of failure as a result of going through that training. So again, so step one is you got to identify where that stress or that nervousness is coming from. Step two is you want to do something to minimize the risk of failure, minimize that risk of failure. The key things in minimizing the risk of failure is start small and then add something more complicated to it. And then secondly, it's a whole lot faster and easier if you get a coach. If you get somebody who knows what they're doing to kind of teach you how to go through those steps, you'll speed up the process exponentially. All right, so step three, this is the last thing that if you understand this, it will show you how to not only reduce nervousness in public speaking, but just about any type of skill that you're feeling nervous in or that you're feeling self-conscious about, you can reduce that nervousness in that skill as well. Step three is you want to stack up a series of successes. Remember that if we have a negative experience, if we have a failure, we will tend to rely back on that and say, ooh, I'm just not good at this, or oh, I feel uncomfortable when I'm doing this thing. However, if the last 6 times or 8 times or 10 times or 12 times that we've done a specific skill, we've had a success, then that first failure that we had has been diminished pretty significantly. Okay, that first time I tried this, I didn't have a great experience, but the last 12 times, I've done exceptionally well. So that 13th time is going to be a whole lot easier. So you want to stack up a series of successes. Now, if you're looking at the visual, basically what I'm showing here is going back to the ballerina example. You know, no ballerina starts off as a professional. The ballerinas are going to start off as kids, and the things that they're going to do are going to be somewhat embarrassing. They're not going to be perfect, and then they'll get a little bit better as they get older, and they get a little bit better when they get into the teen years, and then eventually, hopefully, if they've trained well and they've had a series of successes, you know, they can become professional and do that. So the technique that you're seeing on the screen, though, it's what I call the Toastmasters technique, by the way, which is phenomenal. If you're involved in Toastmasters, if you've been in a toasting group for a while, the neat thing about that particular style of training is that getting consistent growth over a period of time is the absolute best way to gain confidence. However, for most of us, we don't have the time. I've got a presentation coming up in 2 months, and I have to be really good at that presentation. I don't have 10 years to be able to get really, really good going through a longer training process. So going back to the ballerina example, yes, when that ballerina is 22, 23, 24 years old and has been doing ballet for a better part of 18 or 19 years, yeah, that person's going to be exceptional at that skill. Most of us don't have that time, though. We want something a little bit faster. So the thing that we suggest as a way to really stack up the series of successes is to do like we do in driver's ed. Basically what we do when we're teaching a young person how to drive a car, when we're teaching them how to do that, like I said before, you can start out in the parking lot, let them have a series of successes in the parking lot. Then eventually we're going to just get that person to go out and do right-hand turns. And that's it. That's all you're going to do that day is just do right-hand turns. You get really good at doing right-hand turns before you do the more complicated left-hand turn. And then once you get really good at left-hand turns, now we start going through the neighborhoods, and there's less traffic, speed limit's a little slower, but then once you get really, really comfortable going through the neighborhoods, now we'll give you your first time on the freeway. We're not going to start you on the freeway. So basically it's a step-by-step process that you want to use to help you gain that skill, gain that confidence over an extended period of time. Basically what we do at the Leaders Institute is we really encourage people to kind of attend the Fearless Presentations class as a starting point. And that works really, really well. And the reason why is because it takes those 3 steps that we just went over. It helps you identify where that fear is coming from, helps you minimize the risk pretty dramatically because you're in a controlled environment. And thirdly, it helps you stack up a series of successes. The way that we do that is in every one of our 2-day classes, every one of the participants is going to get one-on-one coaching from a professional speaking coach. Now, there are 2 different types of folks who kind of teach classes for us. About half of the folks that teach the Fearless Presentations classes worldwide are going to be people who are professional public speaking coaches, and that's what they've been trained at, that's what they've done, and they might have actually worked for another company and come over and work for us because they saw what we were doing was just so much better than what they were doing before. The other half of our public speaking coaches, though, are really exceptional because a lot of them came through as participants. They were class members. They were nervous speakers who went through the class, and it helped them so much that they came back and said, "This is life-changing. This is something that's really exceptional. I want to do this. I want to help other people get the results that I got." And so that's one of the neat things about our coaches is that most of them have been in a situation that you're in right now, and they can help you. The key thing about the classes, though, is that it's a controlled environment. It's kind of a safe space. It's where you can experiment without a risk of something traumatic happening. So it's because it's in that controlled environment, because we know what we're there for, because there's a professional there helping us, it makes it much easier to mitigate the risk or to lower that risk of failure. And the technique that our coaches really use it's a step-by-step process where the first thing we're going to do is teach you something. And most of the time, the teaching that we do in each one of the modules that we cover in the class is very short. Typically, it's only 5 or 10 minutes, something really simple, really easy that you can apply. And then after the instructor kind of teaches that content, the instructor will then show you how to do it. So the instructor will give you an example, sometimes 2 or 3 examples of how that is applied in the real world. And then the instructor will kind of let you practice a little bit, let you practice with a partner or practice with somebody else in the class, get up, deliver that presentation, and then have a success. So you got your first success under your belt, and then you repeat the process. And we add something else to it, and then you repeat the process and add something else to it. So every step of the way, you're gaining confidence. So by the time what's interesting is one of the things I hear most often from folks when they do their final presentation at the end of day 2, they kind of come up to me and they say something similar to, "I never would have thought I would have been able to do that yesterday." that was exceptional. And so they're doing something fairly complicated, something that most professional speakers don't know how to do, and they're doing it at a very high level. And it's because of that series of successes that we've kind of built up. So each person in the class will deliver somewhere around 8 presentations. At least 8 presentations, and that doesn't account the practicing and the coaching with the instructor and that kind of thing. We limit our class sizes to about 10 people, so that makes it where the class size is big enough so that you get some experience speaking in front of a group, but not so big that it becomes burdensome, not so big that you don't get any attention from the instructor. And one of the best parts about the Fearless Presentations class is that the success is guaranteed. One of the things that you'll notice is that if you go to Google and you type in, I don't know what you do, fearless presentation criticism or something, I don't know, something. I don't know what you would actually type in, but you're not going to find it. You're not going to find people that went through the Fearless Presentations class and go, "Oh my God, that class was terrible." And in fact, what you'll find is that in each one of the areas that folks can kind of rate the Fearless Presentations class, whether that's on Google or on Yelp or on Facebook or any of those kind of social media kind of things, you'll find that the people who are recommending us or people who are filling out those forms are giving us 5 stars out of 5. And the reason why is because it works for everybody. And the neat thing about this is that the class works no matter what your challenge is. We're going to help you identify what your real strengths are in front of the group, help you kind of experience that 5-star class every single time. We do have upcoming classes that are imminent here. So we have Denver coming up, I think in the next couple of weeks, next week and a half or so. We had Charlotte, San Francisco, Houston, Kansas City, Detroit, Columbus, Atlanta, New York, Nashville, Washington, D.C., Dallas, St. Louis, Los Angeles. Basically, those are just the ones that are coming up in the next month and a half, 2 months or so. So if you are in any of those cities and you want to attend one of the Fearless Presentations classes, you want to make sure and go to fearlesspresentations.com and register, because once we hit that 10th person in the class closes. You'll notice that the Minneapolis class isn't listed. If you're on the Fearless Presentations website, the Minneapolis class isn't listed on the list that I have here. The reason why is because it's closed. We've already have too many people there. A lot of times folks will say, well, what does this cost? You know, what's this thing cost? And I have to always correct people when they say, what does the Fearless Presentations class cost? Because it's not a cost, it's an investment. Basically, when you invest in yourself, you're going to get that experience, that skill set that will help you not only in the career that you're in now, but if you switch to another career, being able to communicate well, being able to speak in front of a group is going to be a positive asset in just about any career that you go to. But the tuition for the class is $995. So basically, we try very hard to keep this class under $1,000, and the only way that we can do it is to kind of fill the classes up. So if we're getting a consistent 9 or 10 people in every one of our classes, we can kind of continue to operate at that level, and I'll do that as long as I can. But this is the same. This is a class that's much better than most of the classes that you're going to find on the web that are $1,395, $1,595, $1,995, $2,500. So we try really hard to kind of keep the price in an area that you can kind of do it on your own without even having to go to your company and pay for it. So very quickly before we end, and before we kind of go to questions, is I want to kind of introduce you to the really best value about what we do at the Leaders Institute. It's the custom classes. Now, it's really helpful for a single person to go through our public classes, and the neat thing about that is that you're getting exposure from different industries. So if you're one of 10 people in a class, not only are you seeing how this content is effective or helpful for you and your industry, but you're seeing people from 9 other industries that are also getting benefit from it. So you see the application in a lot of different ways, and that is a great advantage. However, one of the best values is when you have us come in and do a custom class for your company or for your group, and we can do these for groups as small as 5 or 6 people. Although, just so you know, the best value is when you can kind of max out 10, 11, 12 people or so in a company class. The neat thing about these custom classes is that they're delivered at your location, and we customize the content for the specific needs of that group. And so everybody's kind of learning together. Now, we've got a lot of folks, a lot of companies that will send individuals to our public classes, and we love that, by the way, because it helps us fill up our classes. And every time we do a public speaking class in Atlanta, we get 1 or 2 people from the same companies over and over and over again. And that is a great value. The missing aspect of that, though, is that if they we're only going to do 4 or 5 classes a year in Atlanta. So they're only going to get a maximum of maybe 10 people trained each year. If they put those 10 people into one single class and we customize the content for that group, now the application is built into the process because the people in the class can actually hold each other accountable for putting this stuff into practice. And so much better value if you do the custom classes. And you can do the custom classes on a half day. You can have to come in for just 3.5 hours or so to do a shot in the arm kind of training. You can do a 1-day class. You can do a 2-day class, just like what we do on the public basis. But I think one of the best values that you can get is when you have us come back and do monthly sessions with your group. So a lot of times what folks will do is they'll have us come out and do a 2-day class with a group of 10, 15, 20 people or so, maybe do 2 classes with 10 people, something like that, and then come back a month later and do an additional session so that they're building on the success that they've already had, and then come back a month later and do an additional session. And every time we come back, we're building on the strengths that they've already developed. And those, by the way, those little half-day sessions are as little as like $2,500 to train your entire group, all the way up to a couple of days, that you're going to get into the $7,000 or $8,000 level. But it's still a lot cheaper than sending 10 people or 12 people to a public class. So you can get a much better value on the corporate side. Now, if you're interested in attending the public Fearless Presentations class, just go to fearlesspresentations.com, register for any of those public classes. If you're interested in a corporate class or a custom class from our company, you can just basically just reply to the email that was sent to you with the notification about how to log into the webinar. Any of those kind of responses will kind of get to us. So I'm going to open it up for questions. It looks like we're right at the 30-minute mark, so that's awesome. We finished right about the time that I wanted to. But I'll open it up for questions, you guys. And so kind of put me on the spot. Let me, if you have a question, let me know. And we'll see. I'll check the chat here as well. Sure, go ahead.
Just a question. Hi, this is Ravinder here from Philadelphia. Any classes coming soon in Philadelphia area?
In Philadelphia, you said?
Yes.
We do classes in Philadelphia. We also do them in Baltimore, Washington D.C., and then also in New York City. But I believe that the Philadelphia class is coming up in I'd say about 2 months or so. But it'll be on there. If you're not seeing your specific location, your specific city on the list that I've published, it just means that it's not one that's coming up in the next 4 weeks or so. But we do classes in every one of the major cities in the United States, Canada, Europe. We do in London and Dublin and Vienna, Austria, about every 2-3 months or so, depending on the city.
Okay, I see that actually, 1025.
Sounds right, yeah, because I think we just did one in Philadelphia. That by the way, if you're in Philadelphia or Washington, D.C., those two classes almost always fill up very early, and so they almost always have a waiting list. So I would encourage you, if you want to go to a Philadelphia class or the Washington, D.C. class, to kind of register at least a month or two early, and if you want to make sure that you get a spot.
Sure. And also after this seminar class or 2 days class, is there any support like a practice, a monthly meetup or something, or just only 2 days?
But the neat thing about the 2-day class is that once you go through it, it's like a lot of times folks will kind of finish the 2-day class and they'll go, well, wait, I still have some nervousness. Well, yeah, you're still going to have nervousness, just like what we talked about with the skydiving. You know, that very first time that you put your feet out on the edge of the plane, yeah, you're going to be nervous. But after you do it once and have a success, the second time's easier. And then you have another success, the third time. So once you get out of the class, you'll start to see that you'll kind of identify opportunities where you can kind of grow and learn at a much faster pace than you would if you didn't have the training program. But the support, one of the things that we do with the class is we've got an online version of the class, which, by the way, you're welcome to, even if you don't go to the Fearless Presentations class, you can actually purchase the online version of the 2-day class. It's got videos and refreshers and stuff like that. And those are when you attend the 2-day Fearless Presentations class, though, you get access to that for free forever. So basically, you have that forever. The other thing that we do, though, that is unique to our company, I don't know of any other company that does this, but that if you ever want to come back to the class again after you've been through as a graduate, you can come back for free. We don't charge you anything to come back. Now, that's only if space is available. I mean, so basically, if we have a seat available in the class, then we would much rather have one of our graduates come back because they're walking billboards for how great this stuff is. You know, so when we get a graduate that comes back, they're at a totally different level than what they were when they went to the class the first time. So yeah, so there's all kinds of stuff that are built in as far as follow up to make it to where you can apply this in the real world, and some of them are pretty exceptional. All right, so I'm unmuted. Okay, so
thank you.
Yep, good deal. All right, so any other questions? Looks like we got a couple minutes.
Doug, I have a question.
Sure.
So as far as the public classes go, so for a class like Los Angeles, is there any risk of it getting canceled last minute, or?
One of the things about kind of running a company like this, it's really one of the most challenging things for me as the owner of the company, is that I have to schedule classes that are close enough together so that when somebody has a need, there's something coming up that will help them, but far enough apart that we make sure that we kind of fill the classes up. So that is one of the pitfalls of the industry that is kind of challenging, is that if a class doesn't, we have to get a minimum of like 5 people, which is not a lot, by the way. 5 people in a class. If we don't get a minimum of 5 people in the class by like the 2-week mark before the class starts, then we do have to cancel them on occasion. Most of the time in a city like Los Angeles, that doesn't really happen, though, because Los Angeles is so huge that the odds that a class will cancel there is going to be much less. Finding 5 people in Los Angeles to go through a class is not really that hard. In some of the cities that we kind of do, some of the big cities that aren't as big as Los Angeles, like, for instance, we have classes in Milwaukee and Cincinnati and Kansas City, places like that, New Orleans. Those are still huge cities, but those are cities that have a higher propensity to not get the minimum number of people. But as a company, though, just so you know, one of the things that we do, we would much rather have go ahead and hold a class, even if we lose money on it. Even if we're actually going in the hole on it, to make sure that we're helping the people that need us, that need our help. But to answer your question, Los Angeles, probably not likely.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Okay. Well, everybody, thanks for taking part in the webinar. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns or anything like that, make sure to respond back to the email that we send you. We're happy that somebody's always kind of looking at those, even if I'm not in the office. So thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next time.